Welcome everyone to the first Dharma talk of the retreat, and this talk is about cultivating presence, the retreat space, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and meditation. So just as we begin, I'd like to acknowledge and offer gratitude to all the teachers who've contributed to us being in this space together, from all the different lineages, and the lineages that have largely originated in Asia, and that largely also through colonization have meant that the teachings have sort of rippled out into the Western world. So just honouring those lineages and our teachers, including Mal as my teacher too. Thank you. So, what does it actually mean to be present? Presence is largely about mindfulness, and it's also about the heart, or how we show up in the world. Presence is powerful, and in one of the stories about the Buddha, he was even able to transform a serial killer called Angulimala into a monk through the power of the Buddha's presence and the power of his heart. The Buddha, with his practice of metta and loving kindness, was able to recognize when he met Angulimala, who was this terrifying presence in India at the time, but the Buddha was able to recognize the goodness that lay buried in his human heart despite his horrific actions. And the Buddha was then moved through equanimity and compassion to understand the terrible suffering that Angulimala was wreaking not only to others, but he was also doing to himself, accumulating the most terrible negative karma. So it was through the Buddha's presence and his awakened heart that Angulimala was able to transform. And this is the most extraordinary story about, what we're practicing here on retreat, and the capacity of these practices to be very completely transformative. So in this talk tonight, we'll be looking at some of the Buddha's core teachings, and these core teachings are the foundations of practices that are very much alive today in the times that we're living through. Even though it's 2,500 years after his passing, these teachings seem, particularly mindfulness and the heart qualities, are so relevant and important in the times that we're facing on Earth in meeting the poly crisis. And they're as important now as they were at the time of the Buddha. We can recognize how truly, truly blessed we are to be here at Sangsurya, in this extraordinary space that's been dedicated to spiritual practice for more than 30 years. And this is a place that's holding us for the next 5 days, holding us in presence and the heart that is, we can feel that all around us, from the love that's been poured into Sangsurya over the years. So this is the relational field that we'll be connecting with, and it's like the perfect conditions for us to practice embodying the Dharma and sharing this space with each other, and also with all of the beings who live here that Anna was talking about. There's a family of water dragons that live underneath the step, and they're so beautiful. So the teachings of the Buddha are always only an invitation to more deeply and intimately come to understand the heart mind and to wake up to the way things are. So what exactly is the nature of these foundational teachings that the Buddha shared through his insights and realizations? And how can we integrate this knowledge in these times? So the teachings of the Buddha are referred to as the Buddha Dharma, and these are understood to be natural laws, or the Dharma standing for the natural laws of the cosmos. And these things can be revealed to us through our meditation practice. And they emerge as insights that Mal was talking about earlier, so that we can weave ethics, morality, and wisdom through embodying the practices and embodying how we show up in the world. And this can profoundly offer us a path of collective and individual liberation and freedom. Mal shared earlier about the way that insight and serenity work together and can deepen our practice. And serenity involves cultivating meditative concentration and absorption, while insight is like this penetrating into the nature of reality, a little bit like bringing our experience under a microscope, and where we can look into and see the causes of dukkha or suffering. So to help us on this path, the Buddha in his absolute brilliance made lists, and he made lots and lots and lots of lists to help us remember and to help us to practice and cultivate presence and the awakened heart. And we can think of these lists a little bit like roadmaps that keep us centered when we encounter difficult terrain. And the difficult terrain may be in the form of suffering through painful emotions, thoughts, memories, sensations. And when we practice with these lists, it can reveal to us the deeper truths about life and the true nature of what it means to be human, which the Buddha talked about the three characteristics of existence as being anicca, or all conditioned phenomena is impermanent; dukkha, which is suffering or ill-being, this sense of unsatisfactoriness; and anatta, which refers to that in any conditioned phenomenon that we can't actually find a solid sense of self within anything that's impermanent. So, but as we know, we actually need mindfulness first to be present, and mindfulness is this most extraordinary, almost magical, I think, innate human capacity for us to witness and be right here, right now, in the unfolding joys and sorrows of our lives. Mal mentioned Bhikkhu Analayo's definition, and I'd just like to share it again because I agree it offers all of the dimensions of mindfulness that can be incredibly helpful. And Bhikkhu Analayo says mindfulness is a soft, awake, gentle presence. He says also that it has a feminine quality, and you know, the feminine energies are in, it doesn't matter what our gender is, we're all balanced with masculine and feminine energies. So, but to think of it as a feminine energy, I think is really helpful in how we awaken the heart. Bhikkhu Analayo also says that mindfulness is like a friend that's always with us, but just sometimes we forget about this friend, or we may not be the best friend when we forget, but we can trust that mindfulness always is there with us, witnessing, helping us to be present. Bhikkhu Analayo also wrote in his book Mindfulness and Climate Change that he believes mindfulness is the single most powerful thing we have to meet climate change. And they're incredibly strong words from probably one of the most brilliant scholars on the planet. So even to know what we're doing on this retreat is incredibly profound. Mindfulness begins with the intention to pay attention and to witness the flow of our human experience. To embody mindfulness means that we're feeling and sensing, not just in our heads with intellectual prowess, because what the Buddha actually spoke about, he said that a finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. So how do we cultivate and embody mindfulness in the coming days? Mel also already mentioned earlier the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the Buddha's teachings on the 4 foundations or the 4 establishments of mindfulness. And these are the words that he was heard to say. This is the only way, monks, for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the destruction of suffering and grief, for reaching the right path, for the attainment of nibbana, namely the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Overcoming the root causes of sorrow, lamentation, suffering, grief, bringing mindfulness to what is referred to as the defilements or poisons of the mind, being greed, hatred, and delusion. So on this retreat, we'll be very much cultivating and reflecting on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And these 4 foundations, the first foundation is mindfulness of the body. And the body is the ground of presence. So through practicing mindfulness of the body, we can connect with our breath, we can feel and sense the body expanding and contracting with the breath. We can feel the earth beneath our feet and the solidity of the earth, reminding us that the elements that are all around us are also in our body. So the elements of earth, water, fire, and air. And mindfulness of the body brings us back to this sense of interbeing that Thich Nhat Hanh referred to. He called it interbeing, or this sense of interconnectedness, that we are a part of this beautiful interconnected web of life. Mindfulness of the body also reminds us that the life of this human body is fleeting, and that can wake us up deeply to the preciousness of each moment. So this being the first foundation of mindfulness, and I sense that the way that we're often conditioned to perhaps not be so connected with our bodies means that we're overlooking this truth about feeling and sensing the body. You know, in our education systems, there's such a great emphasis on the intellect, and this world of somatic mindfulness can be such an overlooked factor. We're learning with mindfulness to attend and befriend the body, and this wisdom and compassion allows us to be with what is. So we'll be practicing this foundation of mindfulness in the body each morning with the movement practice, and cultivating this absolute sense of kindness and compassion through, it's referred to as heart yoga. And then the next foundation of mindfulness is mindfulness of feelings. And this is where we understand and we can awaken to the way that our mind judges everything that comes through our senses as being pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And these are referred to as Vedana or feeling tone. And often, there's this automatic kind of tensing, avoiding, which is the avoidance of difficulty, or, sometimes when we're being unmindful or we're on autopilot, it can be sort of the reactivity that we experience. And so when we do avoid or we engage in experiential avoidance, we're actually feeding the stress response. So mindfulness kind of offers us such a path of freedom and liberation. Then the next foundation, is mindfulness of mind. And this involves witnessing the continually changing mind states that flow through our thoughts, our feelings, emotions, the stories, our experiences. And there's a fantastic quote from Lama Yeshe. I think I did a Dharma talk about it last year, who says that Lama Yeshe said that there's a thief who steals our happiness, and he said that the thief who steals our happiness is our mind, and therefore we should make the strong determination to throw them out and never let them back in. It's very cool. But I think, it's often, I think the Tibetan lamas were quite brilliant in creating metaphors that allow us to have a little bit of distance and to actually kind of create, a stronger sense of mindfulness in witnessing mindfulness of mind. And then the fourth foundation is mindfulness of the Dharmas. And this involves the nature of reality, but it also involves all of the lists that the Buddha made to help us to remember, including the Eightfold Path, the 7 factors of awakening, the aggregates, the teachings on the defilements, and the 12 links of dependent origination. And there are so many. Like he was really brilliant. His brilliance was in sharing the insights that arose through his awakening. And he did this for more than 40 years, being such a brilliant teacher until his passing. So when we practice mindfulness, we're really practicing connecting and working with energy. And does anyone know the wonderful monk Bhante Sujato? Has anyone heard his talks? No, he's a wonderful Theravada monk who lives in Sydney, and he was once a punk rock musician, so he has a way of kind of engaging people that with Dharma talks. He's really quite brilliant. And he said, I heard him say in a talk recently, that meditation is like karaoke. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Where we need a little energy, almost a little kind of anticipatory joy to sit down. Because if we try to practice with too much enthusiasm, or we're trying too hard, this can sometimes mean that we can easily become restless, and then we can become exhausted, and this can feed the hindrances. So I really love his metaphor. It's sort of like it's just like we might take a microphone to sing karaoke. There may be a bit of nervousness or a bit of anticipation, but there's a lot of mindfulness because we have to, know what we're doing or what song we're singing, and just awakening that joy to our practice. The Buddha urged us to find the middle path in the way that we practice, and he used a metaphor of we should practice like the strings of a lute. If the strings are too tight, the strings will break and we can't, they can't be attuned. But if the strings are too relaxed, and there's not enough energy, then also we won't be able to, play the tune. So rousing this energy, I've been, ever since I heard that, I've been thinking about karaoke and what does it mean to sit down and take my seat. It's been quite helpful. So, even the way that we come to the breath, and then from there, we're able to begin to see the unfolding universe that is contained in the breath. These are practices that can help to free the heart-mind. And when the heart-mind is freed, we can begin to remember that we are this interconnected part of the earth. We're like one of the tiny little cells in this greater living organism or system, where everything that we do, everything that we think, every breath we take has an impact on a ripple effect, not just on ourselves, but rippling out. So this is important work of focus and concentration, loving kindness and mindfulness. So a really beautiful poet called Fred Lamotte, I think he's also a meditation teacher, and these are some words from him that I read recently that are really beautiful about meditation. He said, "Start with something small, like breathing in the stars, holding trillions of them to light up every atom in your body. Then breathe out, giving each a new name and a deeper darkness, more space to polish with the beauty of the fire. Let this exhalation caress the lake, the forest, the city, touching every heart, the heart of fur and feather, as well as the human heart. Then move on to larger tasks, like listening to a stranger at the coffee shop, or smiling at a serious baby who rides backwards in a grocery cart. Then get down to the greatest work of all, healing the earth with your naked toes." So in this room right now is a broad range of Dharma experience, and if you've done many retreats before, we invite you to consider that all of the Buddha's teachings and all of these practices, whether basic or advanced, can lead to awakening of the heart-mind. And if you're new to retreats, as we were saying before, it's not uncommon to feel a little uncertain. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of lists. But we encourage you to just go gently and find a place in your practice that feels right for you, trusting that whatever information you need to hear will be planted like seeds in your consciousness. On the retreat, we'll also be spending time practicing with the hindrances, which is something that we've become very familiar with because we all have an experience of the hindrances being restlessness and agitation, or this build-up of energy where it can become really hard to sit. Sloth and torpor, very common as we begin a retreat and attempt to drop into stillness. Desire, which could be dreaming about what's for dinner or how how much longer until I can get in the pool. Aversion. An aversion could be, oh, I can't stand this for another minute, it's too hot. These are all really rich things to practice with. The last one, the next one also is paralyzing doubt. And this is a really interesting one. Paralyzing doubt often shows up as, oh, this is not working for me, I can't meditate. It also involves not trusting the teachers. Like, it could be like, who the hell do they think they are sitting up there talking about these things or guiding us through practices? Or maybe the teachings aren't, they're not. Anyway, there's a lot of doubt that can creep into our minds. So the hindrances often represent our unconscious condition patterns and can impede our progress along the path. But they're really great because they show us a lot about our habit energy. And Mal sent out some information about the hindrances that you can refer to if you have it with you on the retreat. And while you don't need to worry too much about knowing too much about them or intellectualizing, just to say that all you have to do when you notice that they're arising is bring mindfulness and compassion to what's coming up, and then we're not feeding them. So feeding them would be to continue to create these mind states of mental proliferation, or Anna and I were laughing about papancha, which is where we're just feeding the busyness of the mind. So that often happens through resistance. And one of the things that we begin to notice on retreat is actually how busy our minds really are. And please know that even when you can bring mindfulness to observing the busyness, which might be, even focusing on the breath, maybe just like one breath or even two breaths before the mind darts off, that's when we are mindful. And mindfulness, it's important to remember, mindfulness isn't about getting rid of thoughts or relaxing or transcending reality, but it's just about paying attention to what's here now with a relaxed awareness, patience, and kindness. So mindfulness offers us a gateway to begin to see and know more deeply the hindrances and how these patterns feed our experience of suffering and dukkha. We can also cultivate what's known as the anti-hindrances, or the Buddha's other famous list of the 7 factors of awakening. And the 7 factors of awakening are mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. And these qualities or factors are also referred to as the 7 treasures of a Tathagata or a Buddha. So they basically, to think about the 7 factors of awakening as a counteraction to the forces of the mind that keep us stuck in the defilements of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. These 7 factors of awakening help us to incline the mind towards freedom. And freedom, like in this tradition, is known as nirvana. That's the Sanskrit word, or nibbana is the Pali word, which the translation means to literally to go out like a fire and to cool. So when we apply this to the mind, it refers to extinguishing the three roots of suffering, the defilements, greed, hatred, and delusion. So while meditation is enormously beneficial to our health, well-being, and how we show up in the world, and I just heard a talk with John Kabat-Zinn yesterday, and he was talking about the United Nations have created an International Day of Mindfulness on the 21st, or International Day of Meditation on the 21st of December, and that's with the recognition that the world is engulfed in a mental health crisis and an environmental crisis, and seeing the potential of mindfulness and meditation to bring some balance back into the world. There's also a saying in meditation circles that meditation can reveal what needs to be healed, and this is very true on retreats where there's a concentration of energy. So it can take a lot of courage to be present with whatever arises, and many of us have experienced a lot of pain and suffering and trauma in our lives. So please, making an intention to go gently, just carrying as much warm friendliness and kindness as you possibly can to whatever arises in the moment. And this is skillful, wise action. It's also called befriending and attending, or befriend and attend what's coming up. When we remember that, it's our natural tendency to want to avoid things that are unpleasant, and we usually do this through distraction, avoidance, numbing. We can be quite elaborate and sophisticated in some of the behaviours that we engage in. It's not uncommon that when we begin to pay attention that we actually become more acutely aware of our suffering. And these things can show up subtly. And in my experience on retreat, even when we think that we've worked through a lot of layers of dukkha, there can still be more that's revealed. It reminds me a little bit of like renovating an old house where you just kind of peel back the layers. But in those moments, a good question to ask is, can we trust the teachings and in our practice to cultivate present moment awareness so that we can choose how we show up with whatever arises? There's a metaphor that I've heard Mal describe on many occasions, and that is about our minds can be like pools of mud, and when the sediment settles with meditation, we can begin to see all those parts of ourselves that we perhaps may like to avoid, and that also includes that if we're avoiding the parts that we're not that thrilled about, we can't have it both ways. That means that we're often avoiding the beautiful parts of us too. So Mal says that our unwanted bits are a bit like rusty cans and broken bottles at the bottom of the pond, so that when we encounter these things, we know what to do, bringing mindfulness and kindness so that we can attend and befriend. So this acknowledgement of dukkha, the rusty cans and broken bottles, is the first of the Four Noble Truths. And so that truth is that there is suffering. The second one is that there are causes and conditions of suffering. The next is there's freedom from suffering. And the fourth is there's a path from suffering. And within the Four Noble Truths lie the entirety and essence of the whole of the Buddha's expansive teachings. I find it interesting as a psychologist that at the time that the Buddha awoke and began to talk about the Four Noble Truths in ancient India, I think I read this in Mal's book, the Four Noble Truths, or there was a diagnostic path that was applied to dysfunction and disease in ancient India, or to any problem to more deeply gain understanding and insight. So the Buddha said about the Eightfold Path, which was the fourth, he said that the Eightfold Path contained the essential elements of the path to realization of our potentiality. And these are his words. And what, monks, is the noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of dukkha? It is just this noble eightfold path, namely right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And this is a path that leads us to freedom from suffering and leads us to happiness. It's a path that we can follow through integrating these teachings, and this path isn't linear, but each of the factors support each other in the process of inner transformation. And it's also a path, I think really interestingly, that we can apply not just on an individual level, but we can apply it towards social, political, and environmental suffering to be able to identify, where are there possibilities for transformation. And this is so powerful, and it can allow us to uproot some of these things and to choose other ways of being. I feel like in my experience, it feels a little bit like digesting the teachings, that the more that we digest them and allow them to metabolize, we can feel them working on us from the inside out. It's a little bit like eating healthy food, that no matter what's going on in our body, with nutrition, we can cultivate deeper states of well-being and energy. And this is exactly the same with the mind as we encounter these teachings. A suggestion that is when you notice dukkha and the rusty cans and broken bottles, a suggestion is to see these things as unpleasant offerings. Because when we hold dukkha as an unpleasant offering, we can see more deeply that it has the potential to be like a teacher in waking us up to the truth about suffering. And we can begin to transform our pain into wisdom and compassion through skillful action. So in embracing dukkha, which sounds really weird, like I'm going on a retreat to embrace suffering, but we encourage you to remember the health warnings that were outlined in the protocols that we asked you to read before the retreat. And that means that if you're activated, triggered, or overwhelmed, just remember that you can always adjust your position or posture. You can open your eyes, you can stand up and ground yourself. And Sangsuri is so beautiful for grounding. Or you can do something completely different and shift your attention to maybe focusing on sound or on what you can see in the visual field. Sometimes even paying attention to a neutral place in the body, like the hands or the earlobes, can be helpful. So the invitation is very much about going gently and mindfully, honoring and respecting discomfort, but never pushing through it. Another way that we can support ourselves is through connecting with the inner resources, which are the heart. And the Buddha taught these qualities as the four divine abodes. And these are qualities that help us to connect with ourselves and each other and the interconnected living, breathing world of which we're a part. And we'll be talking more about those in the coming days. We'll also be weaving these practices through the movement practice in the morning, and it's through these practices largely that we remember our common humanity and remember that we're not alone in our pain and suffering. So just being here at Sangsurya and committing to silence and making that commitment to the ethical precepts that Mal was sharing earlier can profoundly influence the mind. We can make an intention to let go of worries, plans, devices, and make it a gift that we offer ourselves in remembering that we're not just practicing for ourselves, but we're also practicing for our loved ones and for the benefit of all beings. And while this has been a very lot of information, please remember that this practice does have a profound capacity to meet global suffering on the planet. And Thich Nhat Hanh said that the way out of what we're experiencing is actually in, and that each of us are called to do this inner work to contribute to outer change. This path of awakening opens up myriad possibilities through freeing the heart-mind, reducing our karmic footprint, and bringing greater balance and well-being to the earth and all beings. Thank you for your kind attention.